Hi guys, and welcome back to the early bird photo news. I've just come back home from an awesome morning session out in the bush with the Z8 and the 600mm TC lens. It was beautiful weather and I found some nice little bush birds. The first few days when I had the camera, it rained a lot, so I could test the weather sealing and the low light capabilities a lot, and the camera performed pretty well, no concerns there. I especially enjoy the size and feel of the Z8. It's not a small camera, but it lies perfectly in my hand and the weight is just right and it balances perfectly with the bigger lenses. Besides the 600mm TC lens, I've also gotten a few other lenses now, like this 100 to 400mm lens that I will take to a few different locations to get a better feel of how the camera works with a large variety of lenses. What stands out to me is how handholdable all the Nikon gear is these days. I know I've said it before, but the Nikon IBIS in combination with their VR is second to none. You can easily handhold large lenses, small lenses, do handheld video, and there's basically no shake in your viewfinder and it's rock solid. And the same is true for taking images at very low shutter speed. So I'm very impressed in that regard, and I actually kind of find myself leaving a tripod behind in the car because it's just easier to handhold the lenses and you're more flexible and there's no concern in terms of shutter speed or shake when you're doing videos. So I'm very impressed with that, and that's the true standout whenever I use the Nikon gear. The other day I went out into my local park and I found this group of grey butcher birds. And would you believe that a bird that kind of looks like a crow with pretty dull colors has a crazy voice like that, almost like a beautiful singing voice? Pretty awesome, isn't it? And in this case, I decided I'm not going to take any photos because this scene just felt better overall taking it as a video, and the Z8 also does perfectly there with tracking the birds very well, recording the sound nicely and giving me fantastic looking overall footage. So I'm super happy with the results. A lot of you guys have asked me about the battery life on the Z8, and let's say it's adequate, nothing to write home about. It will last you like one session. So if you're ordering a Z8, I would definitely recommend that you order 2, 3, 4 of these batteries to get you through a full day of shooting. Speaking of orders, it's great news that it seems like Nikon will have a large enough quantity of Z8s available to fulfill most of the pre-orders right away without having too many crazy wait times like when the Z9 came out, for instance. Of course, I can't be certain that there won't be any wait times, but from what I've been reading on different sites, it seems like the wait time should be a lot less than with some of the other gear, which would be fantastic news. What I also really enjoy about the Z8 is that the different button layout on the back of the camera now allows me to properly do double back button autofocusing, which just makes it much easier for me to work with the camera in the field. So now I have the autofocus with the wide area custom, the largest possible area, and focus with the display button. And then I have 3D tracking assigned to the AF on button and spot autofocus assigned to the function button 1 in the front of the camera. So with this setup, I've been getting some really nice results. Does it happen to you guys that you come home from a photo shoot, you've taken some awesome images, but then you're not quite sure how to get the most out of them when it comes to editing them on the computer? And this is where I would love to help you with my masterclass and my PROSETS. With my PROSETS, I allow you with just one click to transform your RAW files into a fantastic starting point for the editing process. And in my masterclass, I teach you step by step everything you need to know about editing in Photoshop to make your own images look absolutely amazing. Get great colors, remove things, and do everything else that makes an image great. So if that's of interest to you, make sure to check these out down there in the description. Enough about Nikon for now. You guys must think that's all I do these days, and in a way that's true. It's a lot of fun to be out there with the gear, but at heart, I'm also still pretty fond of my Canon gear. So let's take a look what's happening in Canon land. Canon Rumors shared something interesting this week, and that somewhat confirms what I've been hearing for a little while as well now. And that's that we will see some more zoom lenses instead of prime lenses. The first of such lenses we've already seen because we've seen a 2.8 100 to 300 RF lens instead of a 2.8 300mm prime lens. So Canon already replaced one of the prime lenses that they have in the EF lineup with an RF zoom lens. And I think that will happen going forward as well with the 500mm prime lens. We'll likely see a 200 to 500mm lens instead of an f4 500mm prime lens. And I'm really hopeful that that zoom lens will also have a built-in 1.4 extender. I think a lens like that would be absolutely fantastic. It would offer us amazing flexibility in the field. It would be great for filming, it would be great for image taking, and it would give us just enough reach and hopefully in a light enough package as well. So I would have a very hard time not buying a lens like that. Of course, it would be very expensive, but I think it will probably be worth it because that flexibility would be amazing to have. I do like prime lenses, but if you can have a zoom lens that have a similar look in the background and similar image quality, there's basically no downside to it because you gain so much flexibility. Would you guys love to see more prime lenses replaced by zoom lenses? Or is there something that you say a prime lens just has a slightly different look and I prefer prime lens? I think this would also be a good way of Canon to compete with all the amazing lenses that Nikon has been releasing, because on the long lens game, Canon kind of fell behind a little bit. So having a lens like the 100-300 and then a 200-500 with a built-in 1.4 extender would be fantastic. And it fits right in with the intel that I got earlier this year that we will actually be seeing 3 big zoom lenses this year. We've already seen one, the 100-300. So possibly we see a 200-500 and then one mystery lens. What lens do you think that might be? There's also been an interesting rumor that instead of one successor to the R5, we will see 2 successors to the R5 next year. One sort of normal successor and then one slower, higher megapixel camera. Similar to what Canon already had with like a 5D4 with 30 megapixels and then the 5DS series with about 50 megapixels. And while I love high megapixels, personally I would not want to give up frames per second to have more megapixels. And I feel like the sort of 50 to 60 megapixel range seems to be a sweet spot for nature photography. Would you guys agree? Because I think we can still have those high frames per second, 20 or 30 or 40 frames per second that give us all the action we need, and the file sizes are also still manageable. For studio work, however, I think a 75 to 100 megapixel camera would be very interesting. One downside of higher and higher megapixel cameras is definitely that you will also need to update your computers to be able to deal with all the files. If I could choose, I would definitely want to see an R5 Mark II in the sort of 50 to 60 megapixel range with a stacked sensor, so we can get rid of those slow readout sensors and the wobbles we get with it and the rolling shutter. Speaking about upgrades, there has been a rumor floating around that Sony was going to charge users for future firmware updates to some of their flagship cameras like A1 or A7S III. And while that rumor has been debunked by now, I thought it's an interesting question. Would you guys be willing to pay for future updates on your cameras to get new features in an older model? Or is this something where you say, no way, I'm going to pay extra for a camera that I already kind of paid for? I think it could be an interesting concept if the features are worthy of an upgrade and you pay a couple $100 extra, and instead of buying a new camera, you might get some awesome features in an older model. While we're on the topic of Sony, it seems like they're going to be releasing a whole bunch of cameras this year. The most anticipated for me would be the A9 III, because I think that will be very interesting and kind of leading the way and also telling us which way Canon might be heading going forward. But before those cameras, it seems like we're going to be seeing a follow-up to the ZV-1 first, a vlogging camera. Then we're going to see an update to the A7C. And then we will also be seeing a new APS-C camera if the rumors are true, which I think would be quite interesting, especially if Sony manages to put it maybe in a slightly bigger body that lies nicer in your hand with a good quality sensor and fantastic autofocus. Because then with a lens like a 200 to 600mm lens, it would be an amazing walk around combo for birds that gives you a nice bit of extra reach. You might get up to 900mm on that 200 to 600mm lens. Which of the Sony cameras are you looking forward to? The A9 III, a new APS-C camera? Let me know in the comments, and also let me know what you think the specs of the A9 III are going to be. Is it going to be able to shoot 30 frames per second? Is it going to have a stacked sensor? I think yes. And then the big question is, it's going to stick with around 24 megapixels, or will it kind of venture into the 30 megapixel range, which I think would make it much more interesting for nature photography. But at the same time, I think they might stick with that 24 megapixel now that Canon has also stuck with the 24 megapixels on so many different cameras and also on the R3. So there's definitely a case to be made for 24 megapixels, but personally, I would love to see it in the 30 megapixel range. Now that I filmed this video, I'm about to head back out with the Z8, trying to photograph some ospreys in flight on a cliff. I've tried already yesterday, but didn't really get anything good. It was getting too dark too quickly. So fingers crossed, I'll get something. Wish me luck. And while I do that, I hope that you guys check out some of my other videos. Let me know your thoughts in the comments and hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye.